As the world put itself back together after the Second World War, new technologies began to emerge. There'd been attempts at playing football games at night as early as the 19th century, but it was in the 1950s that the technology became affordable enough for the majority of top clubs across Europe to install floodlights. This was a great commercial opportunity. Suddenly, games of football weren't restricted to the weekend afternoons. Football clubs responded initially by taking advantage of relatively cheap air travel, another technological boon, to play exhibition matches against glamorous foreign opposition. These matches proved hugely popular, the most famous of the floodlit friendlies coming on the 13th of December 1954 when Wolves, managed by the great Stan Kullis, took on the Hungarian army team, Honvéd. England's 6-3 defeat to Hungary a year earlier had left its scars, and the home crowd at Molineux feared that it was witnessing something similar, as a side featuring 6 of the Hungary team that had won at Wembley, including Ferenc Puskás, Sándor Kocsis and József Buzik, raced into a 2-0 lead. But, in thick mud, Wolves hit back to win 3-2 in a thriller. "I may never live to see a greater thriller than this," wrote Peter Wilson in the Mirror. "And if I see many more as thrilling, I may not live much longer anyway." The Daily Mail's headline proclaimed Wolves the champions of the world. Now, legend has it that the editors of L'Équipe were so outraged by this assertion that they promptly invented the European Cup. But of course, the reality is rather more complex. Jacques Ferrand, L'Équipe's editor, had been fascinated by a one-off tournament played in Chile in 1948 between leading sides from 7 South American nations. So why couldn't Europe do something similar? And there had been European examples. The Mitropa Cup, for clubs from Central Europe, had begun in 1929, and although it was contested only once between 1940 and 1955, it did actually carry on until 1992. The Latin Cup, for teams from Spain, Portugal, Italy and France, ran from 1949 until 1957. But what Ferrand dreamed of was a continental tournament, for the champions of all European leagues to come together in one grand tournament. And the Treaty of Paris in 1951, establishing the European Steel and Coal Community, which was a forerunner of the European Union, demonstrated the political climate of the time, a desire for reconciliation and integration. Then, in 1954, UEFA was founded. One of its first goals was to establish a European equivalent of the Copa America, and the UEFA Nations Championship began in 1960. However, the highly respected journalist, Gabriel Hanot, a former France international, really was outraged by the Mail's response to Wolves' win. He'd first raised the idea of an international club competition in 1934. L'Équipe liked the idea when he mentioned it again and mounted a campaign. By the end of January 1955, a full proposal had been laid out. 16 nations would each nominate a club to represent them in a 2-legged knockout competition. In March, Hanot presented this plan to UEFA at their Congress in Vienna. So although the USSR refused to take part until 1967, and although Chelsea bowed to the pressure from the Football League not to distract themselves from domestic competition, Matt Busby and Manchester United would not be so biddable a year later, the first tie took place, a 3-3 draw between Sporting and Partizan in Lisbon on the 4th of September 1955, just 9 months after Hanot had resurrected his idea. The first winners were Real Madrid, for whom European competition came just at the right time. They were a major side before the Second World War, but it was after their former player and manager, Santiago Bernabéu, became president in 1943 that they were elevated to a new level. He professionalized the setup and oversaw the construction of a new stadium, which opened in 1947. From 1953, when the Argentinian Alfredo Di Stefano was signed from under the noses of Barcelona, Bernabéu instituted a policy of signing world stars. And by the end of the decade, Ferenc Puskás, Raymond Kopa, Paco Gento, and José Santamaría were all at the club. The European Cup was the perfect stage for them to exhibit their ability. And it's not to say that they were Franco's club to point out that the dictatorship took full advantage of the propaganda opportunities presented by their success. Madrid had already won the first 4 European Cups when they went to Glasgow for the 1960 final against Eintracht Frankfurt. What followed was one of the greatest attacking displays football has ever known. Frankfurt took the lead, but Di Stefano got 3 and Puskás 4, as Madrid won 7-3. A crowd of 127,000, including an 18-year-old Alex Ferguson, was enraptured. Madrid had 5 in a row, their evident greatness giving the tournament legitimacy. So, the European Cup, Hanot's great idea, had captured the imagination of the public and was very obviously where the best club football in Europe was being played. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Daniel Taylor, Ollie Kay, Amy Lawrence and James Horncastle. With the latest transfer news and insight on every Premier League football story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football.